Okay, welcome to part 2 of the Production Possibility Frontier Opportunity Costs lecture. And we start this one, it says in-class exercise. Naturally, you're watching on a video, so I still want you to go through the process here, so which means I want you to pause this to go through this. I want you to take a moment to try to figure out how much will your 4 years of college cost. This is assuming you're doing 4 years of college. How much will that cost you in total? What's the entire cost? Take a moment. You can pause this. I want you to try to jot everything down. And once you have your estimate, start this back up, and we will talk about really what should be factored in. Okay, I hope you have paused this and started to consider this. So what should be put into your 4 years of college cost? Like what should be included? Well, an obvious one is tuition, right? The tuition costs should definitely be included in the costs for your 4 years of college, as well as the books, right? Tuition and books clearly are costs that you would not be incurring if you weren't going to college. Therefore, these should be included. Note these can differ across students, right? Depending how much you have to spend in books, depending how much depends how much you're paying. Some different people have different levels of scholarships. So your 4 years of college could cost different amounts depending on who you are. So you have your tuition and your books. One thing that a lot of people consider is room and board. Room and board, though, is a bit iffy on whether to factor that into your 4 years of college. Right? You have to live somewhere, and you have to eat something. So the only way you'd put room and board in is you'd put perhaps if you have to spend more on room and board to go to college than you would if you were living elsewhere. If that's the case, then you could include that extra amount. But otherwise, room and board probably isn't appropriate for considering it for the cost of college. One thing that almost definitely should have been on everybody's list, but I bet a lot of you might have overlooked. If you are going to college and instead of college you would have worked, whatever your lost wages were should be factored in as a cost of college, right? If you could get a job for $10 an hour, well, $10 an hour means you make about $20,000 a year. Now, let's say you work a third of the year, while you go to college. So that means you $13,000 cost of lost wages, right? And that's a very real cost that doesn't show up on your tuition bill, but that certainly is a cost when you're factoring in how much is my college costing me. That should be included. Once again, that'll differ from people. Some of you it might be minimum wage. Others, perhaps you could make $20 an hour. So depending how much you could earn is how much that cost is. Now there could be other things. Those are probably the two big ones are really tuition and books and lost wages. Anything, if you have to spend a little bit more to be at college than you would have otherwise for something, then that could be factored in. But the really big ones would be tuition and books and lost wages. You could come up with a rough estimate, per year and then multiply it by 4. What you come up with is probably going to be a little bit scary. The good news, as we'll cover later, college degrees are incredibly good values in terms of return on investment. Often, the rates vary depending on the study you see, but often, 10 to 15% per year. Like you'll make each year of college, you get a return on your investment of 10 to 15% every year you decide to work for the rest of your life. That's college graduates make an enormous amount more than high school graduates, so there is a really good return on the investment for most individuals. So why did I have you go through this exercise? Well, this relates to opportunity cost, right? I wanted you to factor in the opportunity cost of going to college, and it's not just what you paid. Remember the general definition, the opportunity cost, it's what you give up to get something. A little more specific, the opportunity cost of any decision is the value of the next best alternative that the decision forces the decision maker to forego. So if you're talking about money, you're not just The cost of college isn't just the tuition, because you gave up money as well that you would have earned working, so that's why it's a little bit more. You really should be considering opportunity costs when making a decision. So if you are, let's say you're working, let's say you work in the summer to pay for school in the school year, and you don't work in the school year. If you could make, let's say you work a 6-hour shift and you could make $15 an hour, that would be $90 you'd earn. If instead your friends say, hey, let's get a ticket to the baseball game, we're going to spend $30. What's the cost of you going to that baseball game? Well, it's not just $30, right? Because if you don't go to that game and you worked instead, if that's the next best alternative, I should say, really your cost is $120. Or another way to put it, if you decided to work instead of going to the baseball game, you will go back to school with an extra $120 in your pocket than if you decided to go to the baseball game and not work, right? The opportunity cost of going to that game is $120. That's the monetary figure you should be putting in your head when you're figuring, should I go to this game? Well, it's not to say that it's the wrong decision, but the decision should be, to make it the correct decision, to be considering the right information, you should be considering all of the costs, the opportunity cost. Related to that, opportunity costs aren't strictly related to economic items. Things that are otherwise free have an opportunity cost. Milton Friedman had a phrase, and I don't even know if he was the first to say it, but he's the one I've attributed it to and heard him say it. There's no such thing as a free lunch. And the idea behind that is if somebody offers you a free lunch and you take it, well, there was something else you could have done instead. So there's some cost to that. If you're watching this video right now, right? If you weren't watching this video, what would you be doing? Well, something else. That's a cost, right? There's some of them. Maybe you'd be watching a television show. Maybe you'd be sleeping. Maybe you'd be exercising. Who knows what it is? You probably have some idea in your head. That is the cost of watching this video right now. I'm doing my best job. I'm trying to make the benefits of watching this worth the cost and making this engaging. And of course, that you have the incentive to get the college credit for it as well. But it's not just monetary items that have a cost. Things that are otherwise thought of would otherwise be free have opportunity cost. So let's go through a monetary example. This is an example that is similar to what you might see in homeworks or on an exam as well. So consider a person, 2 alternatives: to spend an afternoon, work for 4 hours at $12 an hour, or go to the theater. Theater ticket costs $15. What is the opportunity cost of going to the theater? Go ahead and pause this, take a moment, and come up with the answer, and then we'll go through it together and see if you've got it right. Okay, I hope you've paused it. Hope you've considered, tried to work this out. Right? The opportunity cost, well, there's 2 things. One, you're giving up the 4 hours of work at $12 an hour, and you have to pay for the ticket. Both of those should factor in. And in this case, the opportunity cost is $63. You're giving up $48 in lost wages. You're giving up $15 in pay for the ticket. Opportunity cost is $63 to go to the theater. So opportunity costs, it's an important concept, and it will keep coming up throughout the rest of the course, right? Opportunity costs, it's about to come up in the production possibilities frontier, but it also comes up when we start to talk several other points in the course. And in fact, when we start to think about a firm's costs, we think in terms of opportunity cost, right? And a lot of it is if you own a business, what's the lost wages you could have had if you were working for somebody else? Right? That should be considered if you're thinking, is it smart for me to stay in business? That's the rational decision. All of this information should be included in order for you to make a rational decision. Okay, so we're going to shift gears from opportunity cost to the production possibilities frontier. So what the production possibilities frontier asks, the question it asks is, given a fixed amount of inputs, how can one maximize output? And the production possibilities frontier, it's a curve, or often when we do it in class, it will be a line that shows the maximum output that can be achieved given both time and fixed resources, right? We have some limited amount of land, labor, and capital. The production possibilities frontier, it's a curve that shows the maximum output that can be achieved given some set amount of time and fixed land, labor, and capital. So the production possibilities frontier, the PPF, it will be a graph. This will be the first time we are graphing. And for this particular graph, it's going to have one output on the x-axis and another output on the y-axis. And the production possibilities frontier shows the different combinations of products that can be produced given available resources and existing technology. And when we start up part 3 of the opportunity cost PPF lecture, we will begin by graphing the what a production possibilities frontier might look like, and then going through some specific examples of what production possibilities frontiers would look like.